to go into the Q&A session here. Lots of questions. If you have questions, please send us an email, info@thepulseinstitute.org. I'll get your emails. And you can also text 313-597-0291. For those who are joining us from the United Kingdom, just send an email, info@thepulseinstitute.org. It's right on the screen. Or you can text 313-597-0291 for those who are joining us around the nation. Again, this is the PuLSE Institute, Detroit's national anti-poverty think tank. Our keynote speaker tonight, Dr. Julius Garvey, the son of Marcus Garvey, the father of the 20th century Black freedom struggle. Dr. Garvey, there's a lot I want to talk about while we have this 40-minute Q&A here, but I want to go straight into the exoneration quest, the Justice for Garvey movement that you have been building to exonerate one of history's greatest Black leaders. Tell us about, give us a synopsis of the Justice for Garvey movement here and why it is important to you, in as much as the length and breadth of your accomplishment is profound, as I say that, but you have been on this crusade to exonerate Garvey, and you're now taking it to Joe Biden's doorstep, something that we on this end support. Tell us.
Well, basically, we've been on this road since at least 1987, which was the centennial of my father's birth, when we appeared before the House Judiciary Committee, which was chaired at that time by John Conyers from your district there in Detroit, who was very, very interested in Marcus Garvey, his history and his accomplishments. And we gave testimony with people such as John Henry Clark, Tony Martin, Robert Hill, and Judith Stein, and the Jamaican ambassador. Jamaican government was very much behind our efforts as well. And they have been behind our efforts all the way back, going back to one of our first prime ministers, Eddie Seaga, who one of the first things that he did was came up to President Ronald Reagan and asked for the exoneration of Marcus Garvey. So it's been a long process. And then over time, we've worked with Charles Rangel, who at that time was chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. And he would co-sponsor resolutions, every year to exonerate Marcus Garvey, but they never really got through the Congress. But, he is very much in Marcus Garvey's corner, coming out of Harlem and understanding, how the Democratic Party, et cetera, developed in Harlem, out of Garveyites, et cetera. So that has been part of our trajectory. And then, we had President Obama, the first Black president. And in 2016, we developed our petition, which was a legal document which had been gone over by a very well respected legal firm there in Washington, D.C., international firm, Aiken Gumpower. And we presented that document, which showed that there was absolutely no evidence to incriminate Marcus Garvey, that no crime was committed by Marcus Garvey. So we presented that to the Obama administration, but they did not act on it. So we're back in that movement at the present time, again on our own, but also Congresswoman Clark from New York district. She's out of Brooklyn. She has tabled House Resolution 148 in the Congress, and that's now in the Judiciary Committee, and that's about the exoneration of Marcus Garvey. So that's going on at the congressional level, and we're trying to develop a movement, shall we say, at the people level, to press the president to consider that it's about time. It's been 100 years of an injustice committed against one of our greatest leaders in terms of the African-American community, but also one of the greatest men of all time, in my opinion. And this injustice cannot stand forever. And it's time for it to end now. If it doesn't end now, it will end at some point in time, but the time really is ripe. I mean, President Biden was the vice president of Obama back in 2016. So he's not a stranger to what I'm talking about. So he's now the president. He has a vice president who is of Jamaican ancestry as well as Indian. So he should be sensitive to that And, you know, he has made different statements about justice, especially with the George Floyd situation. And in his inauguration address, he has talked about rectifying the injustices, past injustices here in the United States of America. So there's a stain against the Justice Department here, J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI, as well as a stain against Marcus Garvey's name. Of course, I'm primarily interested in clearing the stain against Marcus Garvey's name because no crime was committed. But I'm also interested in America turning the corner. America has to look at in the mirror and recognize its history of inequality, its history of oppression, its history of preventing African people living in a predominantly, shall we say, a white country, if you will, trying to be their best humanity. And every time we rise up, we get knocked down. You know, and again, if you go back to early 20th century, Marcus Garvey was not alone. People coming back from World War I, where soldiers were being lynched. 1917, 1919, I think 1919, the summer was Bloody Summer. The Bloody Summer, 1917 was East St. Louis, that burned the place down. 1920 was Tulsa, when they burned down the Black Wall Street. And Marcus Garvey was convicted in 1923, but J. Edgar Hoover had him in his sights from 1919. We have an internal memo that says there's a Negro agitator up in Harlem, and we've got to get him. So, you know, he was looking for something to convict Marcus Garvey, criminalize Marcus Garvey, as we know that the justice system here tends to criminalize us as a people. And again, this has to change. And, you know, I'm glad for this format to be able to say this, that, you know, 40% of the inmates in the prisons are African-American people. I mean, something is wrong with that when we only represent, you know, less than 15% of the population. So we're being criminalized. You know, Francis Cress Welsing has talked about that. And our leaders are criminalized, our people are criminalized. As you know, J. Edgar Hoover was trying to get salacious information about Martin Luther King. You know, I mean, actually I did the same thing with my dad. That was the first thing that tried to get on him, something on the Mann Act, transporting a female across state lines for immoral purposes. So you know, as you know, the first Black FBI agents were hired to infiltrate the Garvey organization. And they'd be peeping through keyholes, you know, when my father would travel and my mother was his secretary. And, you know, they were looking to try to catch them together or something like that. I mean, across state lines, but of course they couldn't find any impropriety. So they came up then with this other business in terms of using the mails to defraud in the Black Star Line. But as I mentioned, they did the same thing with Martin Luther King. So nothing changed over time. And you know, Malcolm X was also targeted. We know that. So over and over, any evidence of Black excellence, any evidence of us raising ourselves up by a bootstrap is knocked down by the system. And this has to stop. I mean, it's enough already. And I think, you know, from my perspective, I mean, that's why I'm moving, you know, on this, and I've been in some sense relentless. You know, it's not for my entertainment, but I think it's for all African people everywhere. We cannot continue to be criminalized. And people who attempt to criminalize us, they have to stand before the bar of justice. They can't just walk away. And we need to bring this now to President Biden.